The people that I grow up with right now do not know what it means to be married to begin with.
Historically, long-standing tradition has, we see that marriage has always been defined as between one man and one woman. The state has had an interest in regulating or licensing marriage, if you will, because it has an interest in the family and children.
There aren't very many truly human universals. Marriage is one of them. It has a basic shape. There in every human society from the beginning of the history of the human race. There are certain variants and customs and so forth, but it has the same basic shape in every society.
The essential nature of marriage, which is the covenant of a man and a woman for the sake of the procreation and education of children. And it's about children.
One of the main objectives of getting married is creating that ideal situation in preparation of bringing a child into the world and creating an ideal person for that society.
Marriage is three characteristics. It's a sexual union between a man and a woman, not any other kind of a union. It's a public union. So society or law somehow regulates this with corresponding rights and responsibilities. And it's a union for the sake of bringing children into the world and raising the next generation of children. Every human society has understood this, and that's why society has a stake in marriage, because marriage has to do with the bringing into new life and raising those children to be the next generation of citizens.
It's very important for the state to preserve natural marriage, the marriage of one man, one woman, because it's the duty of the state to try and advance the common good. And what's more important for our common good than the good of children?
Marriage for me, if I were to say briefly, has been a journey of giving and not taking. Something that was going to bear fruit to something beyond, just the act of sexuality. That there was an authentic love and a desire to procreate, a way to time bind what I had learned from my past and to continue it to other generations.
And with the children, I witnessed it, that there are times when, like if we hug or hold hands or something, how they get happy. I mean, they're just like, they like it, they like to see that. I know it gives them security.
Children need a mother and a father. Children long for a mother and a father when they don't have them.
When I was about 8 years old, my mother died. There were good women role models in my life. My father remarried, but it's just not the same.
Growing up, I came from a broken family, and I spent most of my time with my mother, and my father worked a lot, and so we hardly saw him. I think that's what I felt I was lacking growing up, and I want to provide for my children what I didn't have.
Well, I grew up only with my grandma, and she was my mom and my dad. And I guess my mom left me when I was 2 years old. So, and when I was a little kid, I hated it when there was Father's Day or there was Mother's Day and I didn't have them around. I felt like left out.
I do have friends who kind of like see me as being a lucky one, for having a mom and a dad.
I think we see the consequences of what happens in a society when children grow up without a mother and a father, and especially without a father.
I think one of the primary things that we see as we kind of look out in society is that, in general, a lot of African American children are very, very angry. They're very, very angry because their fathers have not been in their lives, and it kind of plays itself out in several ways. One, I think if we look at the incarceration rates of African American males in our communities, it is extremely high. I think if we look at the delinquency rates of kids not finishing high school, they're very, very high in our communities, and I think a big part of that is because they don't have fathers, or very few of us have fathers in our lives who are encouraging us, who are role modeling what healthy masculinity looks like, and who are available to us when life gets very, very difficult.
There are a lot of single parents, especially single mothers, who are making great sacrifices to give their children the best possible upbringing that they can. Those people deserve our praise, and they deserve our support for the sacrifices they make for the good of their children, putting their children first. But to intentionally deprive children of a mother and a father is something quite different. If a child grows up without one or the other, how are you going to tell that child that having a father isn't important? Or having a mother isn't important, depending on who the parents are? By virtue of biology, we need a man and a woman to bring a child into the world. It's a logical consistency of design that a child needs a mother and a father to grow up in the best possible context.
It's difficult raising teenage boys, you know, and the conflicts that they have with each other. I think having the male presence in the home tempers that a lot. And I think as the boys, especially now that they're entering their teenage years, that having that male presence in the house is just so important, because sometimes I see that they definitely respect their father more at this age, you know, and I'm sure things change. And when they were little, they always wanted to be with me. And so as they grow and develop over the years, I can see where the parental relationship with the children changes.
There's stuff my dad could talk to me about that my mother would never talk to me about. And there's stuff that my mother would talk to me about that my dad would never touch, or that he just wasn't sensitive enough to understand.
There are certain things that need to be done in a child's life, and it needs to be done by a male and a female.
For me to raise my children without a mother is for me not to be able to communicate to them what it is to be a woman. Because I have daughters, I can't tell them what it is to be a woman.
And it's a beautiful enrichment for the children to see the roles of father and mother, husband and wife. Because they in turn acquire these insights from the very beginning. And that's the beautiful thing of establishing a family that has these characteristics at the very beginning for a child's life.
My daughter is going to see how me and my wife interact, how I treat my wife, and she's going to look at that and say, yes. You know, she won't say it consciously, but it'll be in her head. She's going to see it every day. And when she grows up, she's going to be like, that's not how I've seen it before. It's just going to register.
What I've said, none of it should be taken to imply any sort of disrespect for our neighbors, our co-workers who are homosexual, who experience same-sex attraction. They have an incomparable dignity before God, and they deserve to be treated with that dignity.
This is nothing, has nothing to do with discrimination. We believe in the equality of all people, but we have to be careful not to confuse equality with sameness. That's a very common mistake. For example, men and women are equal. We believe that. But men cannot conceive a child within their body and give birth to that child. Likewise, a woman cannot give the seed of life to another woman. So they're different. That doesn't mean that they're not equal, but it's an equality of complementarity, not of sameness.
Sometimes when we wish to defend the traditional model of marriage, a man and a woman and the children with whom they share their lives, we are accused of attacking others. It is the defense of traditional marriage is not an attack on anyone. We recognize, and we call on our neighbors and our friends to recognize, that the model, the successful millennia-long model of marriage is between a man and a woman.
We do not allow minors to marry without consent. We have restrictions on marrying people of family that are too closely related. So there's not an absolute right to marry just anyone who you please.
What are the objections to same-sex union? It's precisely because that's not the kind of relationship, love relationship, that leads to bringing children into the world and raising them up.
If the idea is that same-sex couples should have the same rights and benefits of marriage, and on the other hand, people who believe that marriage should only be between a man and a woman should be able to have their opinion respected, that's what we have right now. We have that in the law with the civil unions in California. There are two ideas of marriage on the table, and they're mutually exclusive. They cannot both stand. Right now we're in a struggle. Which one is going to prevail? Only one can. Eventually one is going to be left standing.
The church's concern is not for the church or to protect the prerogative of the church. The church's concern is for, obviously, families, for children, but also for the state, because there is here something, I think, that is deeply dangerous.
If the California Marriage Amendment does not pass, the question is, what are the consequences, if we can speculate, look into the future, for allowing same-sex marriages in California to continue? Schools are required in their health classes to teach about marriage. So if marriage is defined as between opposite sex couples and same-sex couples, that will have to be taught to all children in public schools, which may be contrary to parents of these children who have different views. The parents will not have an option to opt out of this teaching because it will in fact be the law in California.
I think that under the guise of individual right, we are finding that our rights are being systematically eroded.
The big issue now is that kids don't know that, they don't recognize it, they don't see it, and now they're being confused. And they're being confused because they think the state determines who they are and what they are. And truthfully, that state has nothing to do with who you are.
I wonder, is there, in principle, any limit to the authority of the state if the state begins to regulate what is family?
Society's at a point now where they think that marriage is definable to begin with by a court system, okay? We all know that marriage is defined in the family and comes from the family, and that you need a mother and a father. You know, like they say in Spanish, punto. There's nothing more.